Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Len Waverman, Dean of the DeGroote School of Business, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our first Knowledge Lab webinar of 2021. Still in the same old virtual way that we have been since March 13th of 2020. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We're so thrilled to see 144 of you so far joining us from around North America, probably other countries as well that I can't see at the moment, for this great talk we're going to have today. Let me introduce Yair Berson, who joined us this August, from Bar Ilan University in Tel Aviv and Stern Business School at NYU. We're very lucky to have attracted him and his even better wife, Rev Jones, who's teaching religious studies, to McMaster University. He's going to talk to us today about how leaders' characteristics, values, management style relate to the workplace. So as you can see, he is the director of our new DeGroote Leadership Center, which will be in the building behind me. The building behind me is the McLean Center for Collaborative Discovery, where we will be moving a lot of our programming into when it's completed in September 2023. His research demonstrates how leaders' characteristics, values, for example, and actions such as visionary style affect the followers, the outcomes, and the organizational processes of a firm. And he uses diverse methodologies, biology, neuroscience, surveys, and even financial indices to provide insights. And I found talking to him very insightful for my own leadership style. And I'm sure you will find him all very insightful for everything you do. So let me turn the floor over to Yair.
Thank you, Len. Just going to share my screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really glad to be able to share some of the research we do here and I've done in other places before with you, and this will be a very practical talk. I'm going to try to focus as much as I can on the key goal of this talk, which would be to talk about how you make a difference. And when I say make a difference, I use a term that comes from what we call upper echelon theory, or the leading organization, and it is discretion. So a lot of it is how can you have, as managers or leaders, and by the way, this can be CEOs, top leaders, or it could be even lower level, mid-level managers, any kind of leadership position, and many of us, so many of you probably are in those positions, so this should be relevant. You want to make sure that you make a difference, and that means that you need to be able to achieve discretion, to matter to the organizations. And we're going to talk about what affects your discretion. We're going to talk specifically about how we have to rely on who we are, our psychological makeup, and specifically about values, and then talk about their effects, how this makes a difference, okay? All of it will be followed with examples, and then the second part of the talk, which is basically a more applied part, is about how you make a difference. Once we realize that our organizations are reflections of us as leaders, we want to make sure that we are effective in the way we are reflected. And then what I suggest, and based on a lot of research, and I always say it when I teach executives all over the world, when I'm being pushed to the wall and asked, what is the one thing that leaders need to do? What is, if you have one recommendation for leaders, what would it be? Have a vision. So we're going to talk about how your vision can help you be reflected effectively. And then I will talk about some of the components of visions. So to be very practical, how you use vision and what are the practical steps you can take in order to be effective visionary leaders, how you align your people. So this is just a general model, but I'm sure Len recognizes it and many other people here recognize a typical model that talks about performance in an organization. There are contextual conditions, then there are strategies. These strategies are implemented and they lead to financial or any other form of performance, basic stuff from business school, right? Where does it become interesting? It becomes interesting when you see that actually all of these links are monitored by people. Now, it may sound obvious to you, of course, what else? But not to economists. Economists for years downplayed the role of people. It is the market, the environment, the government, the regulation, all of those other external factors that make strategies successful, right? But people in business schools have shown, okay, that this is not the case. Actually, the reason why this process happens is because of the decisions that people make and the context that the way people interpret, leaders, top management team members, board of directors, interpret the context, interpret the strategy, come up with the strategy, and then take care of implementation, like innovation, that's a type of implementation, and performance. So this is all a process that's monitored by people. And people are subjective. People cannot make the rational decisions. I'm sorry, again, I always talk about Lan is an economist, so we always talk about the difference between economists and psychologists, right? So economists see the world as a rational world. Many times it's a generalization. But we know that, unfortunately, that not all of these processes are rational. And Herbert Simon even got a Nobel Prize, the Nobel Prize, for his ideas of bounded rationality. People cannot be rational. They are bounded by fact, bounded by their psychological makeup, bounded by the amount of information that they are flooded in. Who could predict the coronavirus? Who could predict COVID? Who could predict that it would take forever to get rid of it, right? And so this lack of information puts a lot on you guys as managers. It makes you responsible for the decision. It makes you responsible for moving this process, this classic process, right? And how do you do that? You need to figure out a way to make discretion, to be different. Not to be the same, but to be different. And the guy on the left is a sociologist out of Stanford who talks about he's not with us anymore, talks about being distinctive, being different, okay? So because we have a different psychological makeup, because we have to rely on psychological makeup, we have to figure out a way to be different and not the same as other people. And this is what's gonna what's gonna increase our discretion. And discretion is about the environment. It's about the organization's ability to change, but it's also about your ability, and this is what I want to focus here today, about your ability as managers to envision multiple courses of action, to be able to see a direction for your organization, to be able to see what other people cannot see, which is where the organization is going, where the product is going, how are you going to change or be different, okay? And the amount of the way you are, the leadership style, your ability, the extent to which your vision is on target, strategic, but also inspiring, that's what's going to determine how much discretion you have as managers. And yes, it's not a perfect world. I mean, there is no way that you will be able to control everything. There are all those other factors like the environment, the context, etc., that are going to still make a lot of difference, and you will limit your ability to have discretion. And sometimes we will increase your ability to have discretion. The more there is crisis out there, the more you can change the organization. Say if you work for a huge organization, your ability to change it is limited, your discretion is limited. Okay, if there is crisis out there, people are much more receptive to leaders. Then you have much more influence. But all of these don't depend on you so much. What depends on you is what we're going to focus on today is, again, your ability to provide people with a path to the future. Now, I want to say something. It may sound a little religious or like beyond ability, something that is not human. No, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but you need to be able to show to other people that you have a plan that makes sense. Okay, and this is how you become reflected in the organization. Okay, so when we give you an example of discretion, maybe you remember not long ago, a few years ago, this guy, a captain by the name of Sully, American Airlines, was flying with his plane, just taking off from LaGuardia Airport in New York City. And there was a huge technical problem with the plane, and he started communicating with the tower. And look at what the type of communication he had with the tower: Cactus 1529, turn right, go to Teterboro. Okay, and he says, "This is Sully." He says, "We can't do it." Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro? No, we're going to the Hudson. I'm sorry? Say again? Right? Most people, most leaders, what will they do when they take off? Most pilots, what will they do when they take off a plane and there's a problem? They will go to the airport. This is what you are taught as a pilot. You should try to go back to the airport and land. But if he had gone back to the airport, all of the people on the plane would have been dead. And as you know from media, nobody died. All of them survived. So as CEOs or managers, how many of you, okay, how many of you would go to the Hudson, and how many of you would go back to the airport? Okay, to make a difference, to have discretion, you don't go back to the airport. You find a different way. You find your own way, and this is how you make a difference. This is what makes you reflected and matter in the organization. This is the difference between you and hundreds other managers, and this is what make people listen to you and follow you. Okay, so this story is just an example of how an individual, despite all of the contextual conditions, can make a decision to make a different action. And again, effective CEOs do not just follow what they were taught, and we teach you great things in business school, but we also teach you, or we should teach you, not to follow us, to be unique, to be different, and to be able to think independently and land in the Hudson. And here's one example of somebody who is thinking differently, right? Satya Nadella out of Microsoft took his company, a company that obviously was a great start with Bill Gates, but then kind of was muddling, was not really improving enough, still had a lot of cash, but no big difference, right? And was in a huge crisis. And comes the question, how, and you know, two CEOs who didn't improve the company, and then comes a new CEO, and you ask the question, how can this person change a company? What is about Satya Nadella that helped Microsoft move into a much more successful present and possibly also future? And I use this example because we have a lot of information about him. This is a leader who is highly aware. Awareness is a critical aspect of being effective manager. When you manage yourself, when you are engineers and you work on in your office, your influence on a computer, your awareness is not so critical. Once you start to manage people, you got to be aware. You got to know what is your impact on other people. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do you make a difference? Because you are reflected even if you are effective or you are ineffective, right? So people, leaders who are narcissistic, for example, are reflected. This has positive and negative outcomes for the organization. Being conscious of your tendency to be narcissistic will help you become an effective CEO, even though you're narcissistic, okay? Rude leaders, we have research on rudeness. Rudeness doesn't help you to be an effective manager, but conscious leaders, leaders who know that they are rude, who are aware of it, who try to play it down, who try to make sure it's not over the surface, it's not overt, excuse me. These kind of leaders are still effective even though they are rude. So being aware is so important. And the story of Satya Nadella is an example of this. Satya Nadella, when his wife gave him a gift, a book, which basically describes, this is by a Stanford researcher, describes different mindset that people might have, okay? And this is because he has a child with special needs. And based on that book, and based on his awareness to his style, his culture, his background in India, and all of that, he was able to apply this approach to Microsoft. So he recognized that the story of growth mindset and fixed mindset, okay, the way we as individuals, are we open to changes? Do we want to look for challenges? Or if everything works, this is great for us. And we're just going to make sure that everything will continue to work if it's already working, right? That's a fixed mindset. Which mindset do we have, right? And so that question, which was related to how you raise children with special needs in the book that he read, okay? That question, he had an insight. That is actually really relevant for Microsoft. He just became a CEO and he realized that to change Microsoft, they need to get out of the fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset was the customers are going to come to us, right? All of us order a new computer, order it right away with Microsoft Office. All of us are we're going to be their customers anyway, but that's not always working for Microsoft. It started not to work anymore for Microsoft, and it didn't allow growth. So this is when he realized that Microsoft has a fixed mindset. Managers don't talk to customers, they wait for the customers to call. The company is operating, the culture is operating as if we know it, we are powerful, and nothing is going to beat us. We're invulnerable. But growth mindset is exactly the opposite. So gradually he started changing the company and trying to work with people to adopt a growth mindset, forcing managers to meet customers, forcing managers to realize that they have to work together to be successful, forcing managers to recognize that there is something shared among the different units, a shared vision that is common to all of Microsoft, and not each manager goes his own or her own way. And this example of how a CEO can apply his knowledge and make a difference and choose a way or build on his own characteristics to change a whole company and to have such a strong impact on the company and relatively quickly is what drove us to do this research. Of course, this happened before, but there are many other examples to really systematically look at the extent to which CEOs become reflected in organizational performance. And we focus on values, Len mentioned before. Values are deeply embedded goals, okay, that focus on motivation, okay? So it's not your personality. One's personality is who you are, but values is what do you want to be? What's important for you? But like personality, it's stable. It doesn't change much in our life. We tend to have similar values. There are some changes, but they are not dramatic. So we can assess what matters to you as a person, what matters to you as a CEO when you are a CEO, and how that affects the kind of performance your organization has. And this was the purpose of this study. We focused on financial performance of organizations. These were all traded companies, So we had the opportunity to look at the extent to which who we are as a CEO is reflected in the culture of the company and in the performance. Okay, the values we chose to study were self-direction, security, and benevolence. Self-direction is exactly related to discretion. It's about being different. It's about being innovative, creating, exploring. Security is about stability and predictability. I'm a CEO, that what matters to me as a person, not as a CEO, as a person, is stability. I'm careful, I will save money, I will make very cautious decisions, etc. Benevolence is about caring for other people. So CEOs reported their values, employees described the culture of the organization, and we used financial performance to look at the relationship. And what do we find? We find indeed that when you are self-directed, you have a company that tends to be entrepreneurial. Okay, the culture tends to be entrepreneurial. People think about innovation, they initiate. Something about the CEO personality is reflected in the culture. People sense in the organization that this is a CEO who cares about change. And that over time has impact on sales growth. Okay? CEOs who emphasize security have cultures that are bureaucratic, but in the positive way. They are all about rules, procedures, not necessarily red tape. And these cultures have impact on efficiency. Efficiency here is calculated as the ratio between sales, total sales, and number of employees from financial reports. And CEOs who reported on themselves to be benevolent, their people reported that the company, okay, the company is supportive. Now remember, to have a discretion, I mean, if you are a self-directed CEO and you move into, say, managing Rogers now, it's a huge company, right? I mean, are you going to change the culture? The CEO before you, the founders had a lot of impact. You're not going into vacuum. And this is really, really important. So still, your values will still make a difference. So the effects we find here are not perfect, but we find still strong effects or relatively strong effect in the way you as a manager make a difference in a company. And notice that if you are self-directed, security-oriented, or benevolent, you make a difference anyway, but on different types of outcomes. This is the idea of being reflected. So now that we understand what is reflection, let's apply it. Let's see. We know that who we are matters. What can we do about it, right? I mean, you're totally correct to say, hey, you're talking about these things, about our personality. I have no impact on my personality. And I'm now in my 20s, 30s. It won't change much. You're correct. But you can be aware of who you are and what matters to you. And then if you are aware, you can apply that in your vision. So look at this guy, okay? I think he's the richest guy in the world, or he was the richest guy in the world for 5 minutes. I'm not sure. He and Jeff coming soon in the next slides. So the idea here is they have a vision. They have a plan. They have a conceptual roadmap, a mental model. What's a mental model? Imagine the days before Google Maps and before you had Waze, and you had to go from Hamilton to Toronto, and you had to choose the path on your own. You had a map in your mind. You didn't have to rely on your cell phone. You had a map in your mind of how to go from one city to another. That's a mental map, a mental model. Now, if this mental model of how we are going to improve our organization, where is the future, what products are we going to, what markets are we shooting to have make a difference in, if this is the model we have, and if this is a shared model, other people in the company and stakeholders who matter to the company share this model, then you have an effective vision. Okay, it has to be realistic, but it has to be also attractive, and it has to be crazy. And especially when we're talking about this guy and Jeff Bezos, you will see it's a crazy vision. Now, we're not just going after crazy people. We are going after crazy people who have values that matter to us. And all of us, for almost, or not all of us, I should say, but for many of us, it matters to be to care about the environment, to make sure that, you know, to come up with ideas that are thinking about where we are going as humans, humankind, right? Going to Mars, going to, well, this is where he wants to retire. Thinking about electric cars. So these are values. This is a business, but it's business that's driven by values. And values, we just talked about values, right? Values, these values are values that are espoused by the leaders, but they are related to his, in this case, Elon Musk's own values, own personal values. So you know what are your values. You know what matters to you guys who are listening now. You know what matters to you, right? And can this be relevant to your organization? Can this be relevant to the business you are starting now? If yes, apply it. If not, don't emphasize it. But if yes, try to apply it. Try to emphasize to people how it is you who are leading them, you who matter to them. The vision comes from you, from your ability to offer a path that's related to things that other people care about, and other people care about it because you care about it, because you matter. So still, this all sounds like, what do I do practically now? Okay, you're sitting there, you're listening to this professor, you're asking yourself, oh yeah, I know I need to have a vision. Indeed, London Business School, and I think Len knows that place, London Business School did this study and asked CEO, what is the most important thing that you care about? And they said vision. CEOs said vision. And then they asked them, what is the one thing, a practice that as managers you know very little about? And they said again, vision. So managers don't know what to do. How do you come up with a vision? How do you create a vision? What do you do? Of course, I can't do it in a few minutes. I teach workshops on this. The center is going to focus on this. We do a lot of work on this. But I want to give you a quick, based on my research, to give you some quick suggestions. Most of what we do and most of where we are is in the here and now, right? And also psychological theories focus on the here and now. They focus on how we feel, how we think, what we do, how we behave now. But in reality, many of us, and hopefully, especially you guys who are leaders, we know that we are all not thinking just about now. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about different places. We're thinking about different situations. We're thinking about ourselves as senior level managers, right? We're not just thinking about what we do today and here and now. And what you want to do is to try to push people to travel to a different psychological distance. All of these are psychological distance. When you think of yourself in 5 years, what are you going to do in 5 years? That's a temporal distance. When you think of yourself as a CEO, and now you're a mid-level manager, that's a social distance. When you think of yourself doing the same work, not in Canada, but in England, that's a spatial distance. And when you think about the future and you don't have clear understanding of what's going to happen, that's uncertainty, okay, or hypotheticality. So all of these are dimensions of distance, psychological distance. They're psychological because we are trying to be there in our mind, although they still did not happen. And this is what you should do as leaders to your people. You should take them on a road trip to a different psychological distance. Okay, this is stuff that based on research that I do with a colleague at Stanford, and now we're working actually on a book on this, to try to be very practical about how to apply this deep psychological theory to change things. Okay, and let's look at examples. Examples are the best for this, right? This guy is the other visionary guy. Yeah, he has a lot of issues, and you can argue about the level of innovation. There was just this documentary released a few days ago. Yeah, it's all correct. But still, you can't argue with success, right? And this guy is dreaming. One, because he sleeps 8 hours a day and it's religious. Nobody's gonna wake him up, right? He wakes up naturally. Nobody wakes him up. Okay, the other thing is his mind is elsewhere. Okay, he talks about what's Amazon's vision. Amazon's vision is let's be Earth's most customer-centric company. Why Earth and not global like everyone? Everybody does customer service. But for Jeff Bezos, it's not global, it's Earth. He sees Earth from outside. He makes you, the employees, the customers, the stakeholders, all of us pretty much, right? Over 1.2 million employees. He makes all of these people travel to a different distance. He talks hypothetically, unlike other CEOs. Okay, the vision for Echo and Alexa was inspired by Star Trek. He is a crazy Star Trek person, and he makes a company look like Star Trek. Okay, no customer was asking for Echo. This was definitely us wondering. Here's a CEO who emphasizes in a letter to the shareholders that he's wondering, that he is vulnerable, that he can go to different places. Why does he do that? Not for himself, not because he wants to vent. He does it because he wants to stretch people's mind to a different psychological distance, to make their imagination work, to make them be not in the here and now where they are, where you don't grow, where you stay the same, but in a future, in a different place, and in a different life. Okay? If you had gone to a customer in 2030 and said, would you like a black always on cylinder in your kitchen that you can talk to and ask questions and turns your light, etc., I guarantee they looked at you strangely. No, thank you. And so many of us have Alexas now in our homes, right? Hey, Alexa, hey, Alexa. So sorry if I ignited your Alexas. So the bottom line is the ability to stretch people, to take them to a different place and situation is what makes you a highly effective manager, a highly effective visionary. And another aspect of vision is how we harness people together. How do we take people to align people? Okay, how do we socially align people? Because aligning people is another critical aspect of vision. Now, if you say, hey, you just talked about being different, being about discretion, so why are you talking about alignment? You reduce differences. You're correct. This is stuff we're studying in the lab these days. We're trying to understand how you align people, but still make them innovative and creative. But without alignment, you are not leading. You need the people to follow. And here is what's working for you. And this is based on great research in neuroscience and biology, evolutionary psychology. What works for us is the fact that people, animals want to be in herds. They want to be together. When we are together, we are happier. There is research to show that the brain, the social brain, is actually, there is more dopamine or dopaminergic activity as a result of doing things together. Even stupid things like marching in the army, or clicking on, knocking on a table at the same time, in the same pace. Of course, listening to music, all of this leads to an elation, a good feeling. Just doing things at the same time with other people is something that people want. The brain wants it. It's a way to survive, right? It's basically, if I am part of a group, I have a chance to survive. Think about the zebra or the fish. They're looking to what side they're going to go in order to survive. They'll go with the rest. That's their mode of survival. For many of us, that's the mode of survival. Leaders are smart in their ability to synchronize us, in their ability to facilitate this process, in the ability to be a signal to us that we can be together. Because we are looking at the group and we don't know, do we want to be part of this group? Do we want to be on our own? This is a critical question that psychologists have been pondering for years. When is it good to trust? When is it good to be on my own? Yes, it's good to trust when I see a leader who is appealing to me, who has a plan for the future, who has a plan for the collective, that I want to be part of that plan. Right? So by being visionary, what you're doing is you're reducing uncertainty. You're helping the herd know where to go. And you are influencing your people. And this is a whole group of SpaceX employees moving. You can't see Elon, but he's doing with his hands the same thing, the same gesture as they do. Okay? And yeah, they're happy, but they're also imitating him. This is a sign of safety. If you follow the leader, you imitate the leader, you have more safety. And we study this in the lab. Okay, so in one study, we administer oxytocin Oxytocin is a neuropeptide, if you want, a hormone that works in the brain, and has and what it does is connects between, say, a mother and the young. This is true for, in general, also for animals, some animals. So oxytocin is implicated in this very initial connection. If you take out oxytocin circuits from the brains of rats, they don't recognize their young, the little ones. This is what makes the connection. Of course, for people, there's also culture, but these processes are highly relevant with people as well. And indeed, so what we try to see is whether when we administer oxytocin to subjects in the lab, do we actually increase the extent to which they connect with the leader? Okay, so we take people in the lab, we manipulate leadership, we have a person who is the leader, and some people get oxytocin, some people get placebo. They don't know what they get, we don't know what they got. And we see that people tend to imitate their leaders much more under oxytocin. And by the way, imitation is to the level that if I touch my hair, if I touch my face, if I want to keep awake, if I'm moving my hands, then you are also moving your hands, or the people who follow are also moving their hands, and you're not even conscious to them. And this subconscious mimicry is at the core of your influence as a leader, because when people imitate you physically, they become more attentive to you, and they start to listen. And indeed, we show that it predicts trust and group outcomes. Okay. In another study, we show that when you treat your people in a just way, their heart rate becomes similar. Now, do we know can we influence the heart rate? Yes, to some extent, but can we influence other people that we don't know heart rates? Of course not. But people who are sitting in a group and exposed to a just leader, their heart rates become synchronized. And of course, as you could imagine, that predicts performance, the group success, and all of those other things that people have shown before. And when you treat the people in an unjust way, okay, and this is manipulated in the lab again, it's experimental. What do we see? We see people going their own way. Their heart rate is different and their actions are different. They just know they can't trust this group. They don't want to be part of this group, and it's not a safe option. And in the last study I want to talk about today, before I'm opening the stage for questions, is about neurological synchrony or neural synchrony. Okay, and what we see there is when we expose people to an effective visionary message, when we talk about the future of the organization in an inspiring way, versus when we just provide very technical information, say we are going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to implement our product, versus together, guys, we're going to change it, we're going to come up with a when we connect it to values and emotions, the way we talked about vision only a few slides ago. When you do that, all of the people who listen to you, their brain processes across the entire brain become similar. So we do this by putting people under the magnet, and we can assess their brain processes while they're watching these two types of leaders, and show a huge difference, highly significant difference between exposure to a charismatic message versus a non-charismatic message, an inspiring message versus a non-inspiring message. As a leader, you want to be different. You don't want to bore people. You want to come up with exceptional things. You want to interest them. You want to challenge them. You want to intellectually stimulate them. You don't want the vision to be mundane, and you don't want it to be on walls or in other places. You want it to be something in your mind, in your view, that people can see from your behavior and learn about it. So at this point, I'm be happy to answer questions.
Okay, so while we have the Q&A box open for anyone's current questions, we can go to a couple of the pre-submitted questions that we received upon registration. So the first is how to get valuable and honest feedback as a leader.
If you, I mean, the way to get honest feedback from how to give or how to get. What was the question? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry, it was how to get valuable feedback.
From a leader. So you are an employee and you're asking how to get, so it depends a lot on the leader, obviously, but it also depends on your relationship. In general, leadership is a relationship. And either you have a lot in your relationship or in your actions as an employee or a follower that can influence the leader's reactions and actions. If you show genuine interest in your work, if you are sincere, then it increases the chance that the leaders will reciprocate in the same behavior. But it's not 100% sure, because of course it depends also on the personality of the leader. And if you have a leader who is, you know, not honest or not authentic, then it would be more difficult to get that kind of feedback from the leader. In general, feedback, by the way, there's a lot of research on feedback. And from what we know about feedback, it's not always good. I mean, people think that always good to get feedback. People teach in business school, give feedback, give feedback, give feedback. But there's research that shows, meta-analytic research, that shows that actually the overall effect of feedback on performance is negative. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative feedback. Why is this so? It's because sometimes when your boss tells you, you're great, you're amazing, you're doing an amazing job, wow, you do less. Because, if I do such a great job, then why do I have to work so hard? And sometimes when your boss says, if you don't get this done by tomorrow, listen, I don't know what's going to happen. Use negative feedback, use stress. So negative feedback sometimes increases performance, positive feedback sometimes decreases performance. It's a whole complex question. Do we want feedback on how do we use feedback as a leader, but not so related to my talk. Yeah, more questions?
What are some strategies for leading teams when they are exhausted because of pandemic fatigue?
That's a great question. So one of the things is you should never be exhausted as a leader. They can be exhausted. Employees can do everything they want. I always tell people who, like in business school, want to be leaders, you guys did not make a smart decision, because it is much easier to be an employee than to be a leader. If you want to be a leader, you got to be different. You're going to work hard. You're going to be conscious. You got to be all of those things that you didn't sign to as an employee originally. So when companies promote individuals from an employee position to a leadership position, people should be conscious and aware, and there should be a realistic preview of where you're going into. You're going into a very challenging situation. So you need to be happy and healthy and excited, and even though there is pandemic. And your people, they can do whatever they want. But if they see your energy, okay, if they see and sense your energy, your excitement, your ability to see the future, your ability to say, hey guys, we work from home, we're limited. I know your kids are all over the place, and my kids are probably going to show up soon. I know all of that, but we have to do it. We have to make it. And after this is over, if we are not working hard today, we're not going to be able to compete in a whole new different market and world, the post-pandemic world. So by exhibiting energy, this is what our research shows. This is exactly what we studied. If you show energy, people will imitate your energy. And it will be a wake-up call to them that they have to be energetic and strong. And if you don't have energy, okay, still show it. Show that you have energy, okay? This is why you chose to be a leader. It's not easy. You got to be able to look for the places in you that are still energetic despite the difficulties of the pandemic.
Okay, great. Next question. Is there any value in having a mission and value statement for an organization or department?
Yes, these are all ways to communicate a vision, and they constitute vision. So vision is a more amorphic or less concrete way to look at the future. Mission is the overall goal or the general goals of the business, and goals obviously are the little goals or what constitutes the mission. So you want people to be able, if you're a really effective visionary, people will be able to figure out from your vision what is the mission and what are the goals. But not everyone has it. And every manager should be visionary. You don't need to be charismatic. Some people cannot be charismatic. If you are charismatic, great. You got a gift of God, which is charisma in Greek, and you can actually build on that and be a very effective visionary. But if you don't have that, you can still be a very effective visionary. There's lots of research to show that non-charismatic, non-emotional leaders are still very, very, very effective in their way they look at the future and talk and communicate with people. And so yes, so it is, in this case, if you can't really inspire people to understand what is the mission, what are the goals, you want to be more concrete and explicitly talk about your mission, your goals. But it has to be accompanied by a vision. It has to be accompanied by the inspirational component. Otherwise, it's just like a boring list of things that all look the same. The worst thing to do is to put on the walls or give people like keychains with things like, we care about innovation. We care about, everyone cares about innovation. Hey, what's so special about you as a leader? How can you increase your discretion? By talking like all of the rest? No, be different. More questions.
Is there research to show that the effectiveness of a leader depends on the type of industry they are in? For example, would Bezos be a great leader if he was the CEO of Tesla?
Yes, there is. We call it leader environment fit, and I actually have a huge study about this. I'm not going to bother you with the details, but I would say that it's a great question. It is. So there is an interaction between who you are, statistical interaction between who you are as a person, as a leader, and the context in which you operate. And also, in this case, if Jeff Bezos doesn't believe in the way in the things Elon Musk believes in, then Jeff Bezos cannot and should not adopt Elon Musk's vision. That's, again, an issue of discretion. Connect to yourself. Be who you are. I mean, you were chosen to your job because you are good. And just keep connecting to who you are, what you think is correct, and sometimes ignore, yes, feedback from people who are scared, who are saying, hey, why do you do that? I'll give you an example. When I'm now directing the neuroscience division in Academy of Management, and we want to try to include more and more neuroscience. Some people say, hey, neuroscience is a waste of time. It's just a nice technology. This is not what you should do. No, we don't listen. We believe, and we have reasons to show why we can capture different things, and we continue, all of us, a whole group of people who leads this. And sometimes you want to listen to people. It's very important to listen, but then make a decision on your own about your path.
Okay. Is there evidence of a systematic in leadership trends over time? So is there evidence of systematic in leadership trends over time? Sorry, just making sure I'm reading that properly. Are some industries better at supporting the rise of empathetic leaders?
So like there is fit between leaders and organization, and this fit, leader-organization fit, is a predictive of performance of the organization. There are also aspects of culture in industries. So like we have a lot of research in education, school principals versus research on high tech. And you can see that there are differences. Like in education, being conservative, or not conservative politically, but conserving, having values that are about like security values, is an asset. Because people many times go to work in educational organizations. It's sad, but this is true. They look for stability. They don't get paid as high as in for profit, but they get like tenure or stability. So when leaders appeal to that, they become effective. But go to a high-tech company, a small startup company, and try to talk about we should be stable, and you have no future, right? So yeah, the industry matters too.
Okay. Are there studies about employee stress levels when a leader's values and behaviors are not consistent with the organization's promises or value statements?
As much as I know, it's a great idea to do this study, by the way, thank you. There is no specific study like that, but there are studies that look on the other sides of it. So for example, leaders who are visionary reduce stress because they provide the path. Now, as I said earlier, they're not prophets, they're leaders, so maybe they are wrong. But the fact that they provide a path already increases people's feeling that it's safer and therefore less stressful.
Okay, great. Can you assess a group of potential leaders in terms of visionary capabilities?
Can you measure? I'm going to answer it. Actually, I'm going to not just to talk about assessment, but I'm going to talk about even more development, because this is what we want to do in the center. Yes, definitely. You can assess leadership. You can assess visionary leadership. You can develop leadership. There's one of my colleagues, and you can look up his TED Talk, John Antonakis, is a great researcher. He has a paper that's called Charisma Can Be Taught. And he shows that even this more, mystic ability of leaders, even that can be taught. So yes, we can teach people to be visionary, and we plan and intend to do that in the center. This is one of our goals. And yeah, this is one of the reasons we're talking today, also for you guys to be involved in the center, to in any way. The center will be a way to link leaders and managers and definitely our alumni to the students and to the community. And the way to teach leadership is first and foremost by exposing students who are not in leadership roles to leaders, to real leaders, to interact with real leaders. It's good for the leaders and the companies because these are fresh, smart people just out of school that you can shape them. And it's good for the students because they get to really learn about leadership and see it live as vividly. More questions?
Okay. How do you order honesty, competence, forward vision, and inspiration of a great leader?
So it depends on the context, and it's in some contexts you want to be. For example, I have research to show that when leaders in technology, middle to low level, like team leaders to in technology settings, who relied too much on inspiration, were seen as weak. And when we interviewed, we found out that this was because people in those settings expect them to be very competent and very rational. And so you need to be able, as the leader, as I said, awareness. I say to my students all the time until they hate me. Yeah, awareness is so important. And what it means is that you need to sense what kind of skills are relevant. And inspiration needs to be kind of toned down in a low-level technical setting, but your ability as an engineer, that's why you're leading these people, should be obviously emphasized. And if you don't have competence, nobody's gonna listen to your inspiring messages. So yeah, I go with competence before inspiration.
Okay, great. So we have a couple questions along these lines. What should happen if the leaders within an organization have different visionary styles? How do you compromise the different styles so that the company has the same visionary message? And a very similar question was, when a company has two co-leaders with very different approaches to leadership, which one is right Are they both right? Does it matter?
Yeah, so we have a study that we published with my advisor, Brice Savoglio, who now has become a huge leadership guru, where we looked at the extent to which CEO messages are aligned with VPs messages, senior VPs messages to VPs, directors, like 5 levels in the company. And we show that when they are aligned, the company is more effective. So you're correct in your assumption that it's important. And we show that when your leadership, it's actually your leadership style, is more towards the way I talked about today. I didn't go into details of leadership style, but is about intellectually stimulating people, about inspiring, as I did say, individualist consideration, mentoring people. If you use these tactics, you increase the chance that people will have a similar strategic message. So that was defender versus prospector strategies, and we find that people endorse prospector strategies, which is risk-taking strategies, when their leaders have a similar message to the leader of the top, and people have similar messages when they use this leadership style. So what you want is, we call it also a falling dominoes effect. You want to have a top leader, the leader at the top, to be very, very effective and visionary, and then that's going to obviously go down and influence like dominoes all the way down in the organization. I have long answers to this. I'm just out of time. I'm going to stop here and answer other questions.
Thank you, Yair. That was terrific. I wish I had heard you before I became a dean. Maybe you hadn't written something like that. So I just, on behalf of all of us who have been listening to you, and a large number still here, hanging on to every word. So this has been terrific. And as my wife would say, in language that her mother could understand. So not a lot of kind of big words that were just that are used really to evade what things. Right? So I want to tell you all about our next webinar, which is Wednesday, February the 3rd. It's a fireside chat with the DeGroote alumnus and founder and CEO of Raising the Village, Sean Chung. Sean will be sharing his journey and how he's applied his school from a business school to solving problems and creating change in Kenya. February 3rd, next Wednesday. So thank you, everybody, and see you again very soon.